What if I told you that one year, just one rewrote how Hollywood makes movies, how we watch them, and how we think about culture itself? That year is 1983. It didn't just produce some classic films. It triggered a seismic shift. A turning point where blockbuster spectacle, music video energy, technological prediction, and star creation all collided in ways that still shape cinema today. Over the next few minutes, we'll dive into the hidden stories behind that year. The lawsuits, the breakthroughs, the performances, the surprise hits, and even the flops that left a legacy anyway. By the end, you'll see 1983 not as a year of films, but as the year the modern cinematic world was born. The year the future began. In 1983, while studios were still selling popcorn and good guy, bad guy plots, something else was quietly brewing: the future. It was the year that the idea of a connected, wired world started showing up on screen in ways that weren't just science fiction, they were warnings. The film War Games depicted a teenager accidentally hacking into military computers and nearly starting World War III. In doing so, it wasn't just a thriller. It was a prophecy of the coming hacker age. And while the internet in 1983 was still a specialist curiosity, the movie captured our first mass cultural glimpse of digital warfare. Dial-up modems, war dialing, and the terrifying thought the enemy might not be a foreign army, but a keyboard at home. But the tech in War Games is only the beginning. The real point is, 1983 was the moment Hollywood woke up to the wired world, and so did we. Because this year, film and technology shifted from parallel tracks into one, and that laid the foundation for everything that followed. Star Wars ends, but something bigger starts. May of 1983 saw the release of Return of the Jedi. It was the grand finale of the original trilogy. And yes, it dominated the box office, became cultural water cooler talk, and cemented the blockbuster model we'd come to know. Filmsite.org, +2 Wikipedia, +2. But here's the twist. While one saga ended, another chapter in Hollywood began. With Return of the Jedi towering above other films, ushering in deeper merchandising, brand tie-ins, fan culture explosion, and theatrical spectacle, it quietly raised the bar for how a film is marketed and monetized. The story isn't just about lightsabers and Ewoks, it's about how studios realized that big movies could be events, not just entertainment. And because of that, from 1983 onward, we started to see more films built like experiences. The end of one story released a whole new way of telling stories. James Bond's legal chaos. At roughly the same time that star systems and blockbusters were evolving, one of cinema's most iconic franchises got ensnared in legal turmoil. Consider the case of Never Say Never Again, a non-canonical entry in the Bond catalog featuring Sean Connery returning as 007. The reason it existed? A lawsuit, rights issues, licensing fights. The result? 2 Bond films in 1 year, the official one and the renegade one. What that meant? Audiences got confused, the brand was diluted, and the magic tarnished. But importantly, it signaled something new, that film franchises were now legal and corporate machines as much as artistic endeavors. This chaos around Bond did more than confuse viewers. It made everyone realize the business behind the film is now part of the story. And that shift changed the way we look at blockbusters, not just as entertainment, but as brand battles, IP wars. The shadow of this mess looms large in how so many sequels, reboots, and cinematic universes are shaped today. The birth of the Brat Pack. In 1983, Hollywood found a new tribe. With The Outsiders hitting theaters, we met a cast of young actors who would dominate the late 1980s. Tom Cruise, Matt Dillon, Ralph Macchio, Patrick Swayze, and more. The film itself came with mixed reviews at the time, but it kicked off a new wave. Teen ensemble films, youth culture as box office draw, and the idea that films might be star-making machines, not just story vehicles. What made it more interesting? The behind-the-scenes tension, the real-life camaraderie, then rivalry, and how these young stars were suddenly projected into every magazine and poster. The film didn't just show gangs fighting, it gave birth to a new Hollywood ecosystem, transitioning out of one generation of stars into the next. And just as that change was happening, the aesthetic around film changed too, with music videos, neon, fast cuts, MTV culture creeping in, Flashdance, and the MTV invasion. Then came the film that might look lightweight on paper, but weighed heavy on cinema's evolution, Flashdance. A story about a steel mill worker by day and an aspiring dancer by night. On the surface, a romance drama with flashy moves. But underneath, a marker of how film visuals, editing, soundtrack, and marketing could merge into something that felt like the music video generation coming to theaters. Wikipedia. Critics weren't kind. They called it style over substance. Yet audiences ate it up. Its global box office smashed expectations. It spawned chart-topping songs, iconic posters, a sweatshirt look that became fashion. What this film revealed, and why it matters, is that by 1983, the boundary between film and music video was blurring. Scenes cut like pop clips, soundtracks mattered as much as scripts, image, and aesthetic trumped narrative. Hollywood was no longer just telling stories, you were being sold a look, a feeling, a vibe. And with that shift, the filmgoer's eyes changed. We began to expect visuals that popped, editing that moved fast, soundtracks that hit hard. Flashdance didn't just ride the wave, it triggered the wave. Risky Business, the rise of Tom Cruise. A few months later, another phenomenon arrived. Risky Business, a coming-of-age tale featuring Tom Cruise in a role that would declare him a bona fide star. The famous scene of him dancing in his underwear, instant icon. What matters here isn't just the scene, it's what that scene symbolized. It was audacious, unexpected, pop culture ready. It was the moment a young actor grabbed not only the lead role, but also the narrative of ambition, desire, rebellion, and corporate hunger. Tom Cruise wasn't just acting, he was embodying the spirit of the decade. And while the film wasn't the biggest of the year, it signaled something big. Star-making in real time, youth culture in motion, film as social currency. By the end of 1983, we were watching two kinds of movie stars, the classics of the past and the new breed who would win on charisma, marketing, image, and speed. The American dream, Arnold's transformation. Meanwhile, real-life cinema spilled into politics and myth. In September 1983, bodybuilder turned action star Arnold Schwarzenegger became a U.S. citizen. His story centralized everything we thought a big movie hero stood for: outsider, muscle, ambition, conquest. It was as if his film roles spilled into his real life. That moment symbolized more than paperwork, it symbolized Hollywood's influence on identity. Because Schwarzenegger soon shifted from action star to political figure. His journey mirrored the culture. Big image, big impact, big narrative. This wasn't just about a man, it was about myth. And in 1983, myths in Hollywood and beyond were becoming interchangeable. We didn't just watch heroes on screen, we began living them. Scarface, the film that refused to die. Then came the film that critics hated, censors lamented, and audiences eventually embraced as cult scripture, Scarface. Released at the tail end of 1983, its tagline, "Say hello to my little friend," has echoed through pop culture ever since. On its surface, it was excessive, violent, over the top. Reviews were mixed, but in the undercurrents of music, fashion, nightlife, hip-hop, the film found second life. The narrative of rise, roar, and downfall resonated. What this tells us: A film's impact isn't limited to its opening weekend or its initial critical reception. Some stories seep into culture quietly, then explode later. Scarface became more than a film. It became a brand, a reference point, a cultural language. And in 1983, the seeds of cult fandom, of film as icon rather than just entertainment, were planted deep. The forgotten debut of Nicole Kidman. Finally, as blockbusters soared and stars rose, there were also subtle shifts happening in the background. The Australian Christmas film Bush Christmas may have flopped at the box office, yet it featured a 16-year-old Nicole Kidman in her cinematic debut. Why include this? Because 1983 wasn't only about the big wins, it was also about beginnings. It was about seeds planted, careers launched, hidden starts. Kidman's debut is a quiet reminder that while some stories dominate the headlines, others quietly set the stage for the next decades of film. It shows, in the same year as blockbuster spectacles and cultural earthquakes, there were humble films bearing tomorrow's stars, and exploration, risk, flop or not, all played their part. Conclusion: the real legacy of 1983. So what is the real legacy of 1983? It wasn't just about the films we remember. It was about how we remember them, how they were made, how they were marketed, and how they changed the relationship between viewer and screen. In that year, cataclysmic endings and rebellious beginnings sat side by side. Big budgets, legal spats, youth culture, music video aesthetics, new celebrity models, and the birth of real tech implications in storytelling all collided. We often look back and think, that was a good year for movies. But 1983 wasn't just a good year, it was a turning point. The moment cinema became modern, the moment spectacle became system. The year when film stopped being just a story you watched and became a world you entered. Here's a final question for you. Which film from 1983 still shocks you, surprises you, or holds up today, and why? Drop it in the comments. Because the films of that year aren't just relics of the past, they're still speaking to us now. If you enjoyed this journey through the pivotal year of 1983, hit like, subscribe, and share. And remember, every era has its moment of change. 1983 may just have been ours.